John Fredericks, America's Godzilla of Truth. He's popular and proficient in picking politics with prophetic precision. And now J. Fred's picking sports. Are y'all ready for this? All across the airwaves and streams of the John Fredericks Media Network, John, Jack, and Nate, three guys that are pretty wise when it comes to picking winners. Football, basketball, baseball, soccer, golf, UFC battles, you name it. When the game is on your mind and money's on the line, Godzilla Wins is your guide to picking winners. Before you make that play, hear what J. Fred has to say. Godzilla Wins on the John Fredericks Media Network.
Oh yeah, for entertainment purposes only.
Good morning and welcome to the Godzilla Wins Saturday Picks Show. I am your host, Jack Fredericks, alongside Godzilla Wins Senior Editors Nate Perry and Godzilla Wins Senior Editor Dan Angel. We have an absolutely packed show for you today. We are so excited for this one. This is a big show for us. We are going to talk to RNC Chair Mike Brown from Kansas about the Star Bonds bill. We talked a little bit about that last week. We're going to talk a little bit more about Kansas's attempt to move both the Royals and the Chiefs over to their side in Kansas, Kansas City, Kansas, I guess. Then we're going to be joined by two Godzilla Wins contributors, Manpreet Joss and Trent Connor, to talk UFC 303. We had this, that was a big fight on the schedule because Conor McGregor was going to make his UFC debut, and then he's not anymore. He's got some sort of toe issue. So we'll talk to Manpreet about that as well, get his thoughts on UFC 303. Still going to be a good fight there. And then we're going to be joined by, at the top of the hour, that's going to be 9 a.m. Eastern time, we're going to be joined by Jay Delsing. Do a lot of stuff here, talk a little Copa America soccer, do some Schlossnagel news, the Rocket Mortgage Classic, all sorts of stuff. We call it Around the World in 1 hour with Jay Delsing. So it should be a fun show there. Should be really exciting all day here. I am in the world's busiest hotel lobby in Phoenix, Arizona, doing my best John Fredericks impersonation here in the hotel lobby. So if you're listening on the radio or on Getter Live or something, and you pick up some feedback while I'm talking, it's just people moving in and out. Don't worry about that. It's just me in a hotel lobby trying to do live radio. So super exciting. If you see me wave, it's because I am trying to be friendly. I've been told that I am way too friendly for the West Coast. I'm from the South, so yesterday I got caught talking to a bunch of people on the street who were canvassing for different political issues because they kept saying hi to me, and I kept saying hello back. And then all of a sudden they were like, "Do you have a minute to talk?" And I was like, "Well, it's 110 degrees outside, so not really." And they were like, "Well, it's a really important cause." I was okay. So then I would stand on the sidewalk in 110-degree heat and talk to them about whatever the issue was until my partner got upset and would just walk across the street, and then I would have to leave. So if you see me wave, it's because I'm from the South, so I'm just friendly to everybody I don't know. It's just how it goes. Listen, hey, GodzillaWins.com and all of its subsidiaries are for entertainment purposes only. If you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-426-2537 in Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Louisiana, Maryland, Michigan, Nebraska, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Call 800-327-5050. Visit gamblinghelpline-ma.org in Massachusetts. Call 877-G-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP here in Arizona. Call 1-800-522-4700 in Kansas, New Hampshire. 887-889-7777 or visit ccpj.org in Connecticut. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa or visit opengr.org in Oregon. All right, here we go. The Godzilla Win Saturday Pick Show. Just got to get my screen back up. Like I said, joined by Nate Perry and Dan Angel. If you're listening to the show right now, it's because you love GodzillaWins.com. You love getting up early with us on Saturday and listening to us from 8 to 10 Eastern time. However, we are going to be changing times very soon. I believe next week. I think
July
next
6th.
week is July 6th. Yeah, which I think is next week, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
So we're going to move from 8 to 10 Eastern to 9 to 11 Eastern. So if you love Godzilla Wins and you log on with us every morning at 8 Eastern, next week we won't be there. We'll be at 9 Eastern. So make sure You set your alarms just an hour later. You sleep in a little bit. 9 to 11 Eastern will be our new time spot on the John Fredericks Media Network. We're going to be joined in 5 minutes, y'all, by RNC Chair Mike Brown from Kansas. We got a lot of questions for him just about the Star Bonds bill in Kansas and how they're attempting to entice both the Chiefs and the Royals to move over the line there to Kansas and build some new stadiums to, I guess, derive revenue. And we'll ask him a bunch of questions about how that bill got through and his thoughts on his support for it, which I believe he does support. It's a bipartisan bill. I think um, both the both parties support that bill. But before we do that, we got 5 minutes. So let's do our weekly obsessions here. Nate, we'll start with you. What have you been obsessing about this week in sports?
Oddly for me, I've been kind of obsessing about the NBA. I think I'm like back to being an NBA guy now that I'm down in South Texas. The Spurs are everywhere. They're inescapable, and it's an exciting time to be a Spurs fan. So I definitely got into the draft. I got some sweet merch at Target. I think I'm just all in on South Texas now. For those of you that aren't on Getter or some other platform, I'm wearing like some Target Astros jersey that I bought the other day. Things are good down here. So I'm just excited about South Texas sports. I'm going to be a Texans fan this year. I'm switching from the Cowboys. We're just all in on South Texas sports right now.
Nothing wrong with South Texas sports right there. We got a lot of Astros fans here. Always fun when you can pick up a little gear at the Target or the Walmart. Down in Mississippi, you can only get Ole Miss gear at the Walmart. Every once in a while, you see some Mississippi State Bulldog thing, but Target has some better gear. Dan, what's your obsession been? I know we've been trading emails about Copa America. We got some time to talk about it today. I don't know if that's your obsession. Probably is, but if it is, go for it.
No, I'm going for the other soccer tournament, Euro 2024, where Slovakia managed to make it through, and somehow the best story in the tournament, Georgia getting through. Like this is just incredible that a small nation with virtually no soccer history whatsoever managed to get through the group stage by upsetting Portugal and Cristiano Ronaldo. So a 2-0 win for Georgia, and I do have kind of a soft spot for Georgia because I play as them on Football Manager, so I discovered some of their younger players before they hit it big, because that game is just so detailed that they scout literally everybody in the world. So I had an idea this might be coming, and just to see it happen, like, I'm just really happy for them. It's just really cool to see a small country being able to compete with the giants of the sport.
Yeah, the soccer world, I think, is a buzz right now with both of those tournaments. Even here in Phoenix, and I don't know, there could be some sort of tournament going on in Phoenix here, but I've seen a lot of soccer jerseys for different countries, probably for Copa America. So I've seen a lot of those. Whenever there's a big soccer tournament, those start to pop up, and you see that. So always exciting. And shout out to Soccer Manager and Baseball Manager. Dan, we should probably try to find someone who works for them.
Football Manager and Out of the Park Baseball.
Yeah, Out of the Park Baseball. That's right. Yeah, sorry, 5 a.m. here. We should probably find someone who works for that company, whoever does that, and get them on the show and just ask them how detailed, like how they're able to be so detailed with some of this
stuff.
That'd
be fun.
Yeah, playing the baseball game before, it's like, oh my God, we're going all the way down to single A here, like managers and stuff who actually exist. Whereas if you're used to playing those baseball games, on PlayStation or whatever, once you get to a certain level, if they just start making up everybody's name.
Exactly.
And so it's interesting when they're so detailed like that.
Yeah, Out of the Park is so detailed. Like, one example is if you play the 1994 season, Michael Jordan is on the game.
Yeah, because he's in the
if you play the 1982 season, you can find John Elway in the Yankees organization.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So shout out to them. Look, I'm gonna do one weekly obsession, then we'll bring Mike Brown in here and talk about the Star Bonds bill. But I've been in Phoenix this week for some stuff, and I'm just gonna shout out a bookstore chain down here, 2 locations, Book Gallery, incredible bookstore. They got one in Mesa, Arizona, one in Phoenix, and the gyms you can find here are just ridiculous. I mean, they got first editions everywhere, super cheap. So if you like books like I do, if you like to not only read them, but I mean, I could be accused of collecting books, I think, books that I've already read that are, first editions, old copies, stuff like that. And this place is just incredible. I found a copy of Larry Brown, who's a Mississippi writer, his first novel, Dirty Work, first edition there. Those are hard to find. It's not a novel that's really in print much anymore. Definitely hard to find the first edition. So I was super excited about that. We got a lot of gems at both of those bookstores. So shout out to Book Gallery. Really incredible store. Okay, we're going to bring in, you know what, before we bring in Mike Brown, we'll keep him in the waiting room just a minute longer because, I got to talk a little bit about HealthyCell.com. What an incredible product Healthy Cell is. One of the reasons I'm able to be so sharp here at 5 a.m. in Arizona is just because of Healthy Cell's incredible products. One of our favorite products is REM Sleep. That's REM Sleep. You go to HealthyCell.com. You can find a couple products there, but REM Sleep is one of the best ones that I like to use. And what it does is it helps you get in that third REM sleep. Just get that deep sleep. Sometimes it's hard to do that for whatever reason, if you got to wake up early, or if you just had a stressful day and it's hard to get to sleep, or if you're like Dan and you've got Florida thunderstorms, that could be sometimes soothing, sometimes not. Or if you're like me and your AC went out in Mississippi, it can be extremely difficult to get to sleep. Yeah, we're working on getting that one fixed, but not easy to get to sleep when there's no AC in Mississippi.
Jack, you're bringing up PTSD from Hawaii for me.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
We had 2 months of no AC the last 2 months we were there.
Yeah, that's awful. So, but if you're looking to get a good night's sleep, you can do no better than Healthy Cell's REM Sleep. What I want you to do is go to HealthyCell.com. That's HealthyCell.com. Go find the promo or the REM Sleep product. Go find the promo code Godzilla. Type that promo code in. 20% off. 20% off all products there. We love Healthy Cell. We love that they partner with us. We're proud to be partners with Healthy Cell. So go to HealthyCell.com. REM Sleep. Godzilla Wins is the promo, or promo code Godzilla, actually, not Godzilla Wins. 20% off. Okay, we're going to bring in Mike Brown here. He's going to be with us for about 20 minutes to talk about the Kansas Star Bonds bill and some of the ways that Kansas is trying to entice both the Royals and the Kansas City Chiefs to move their stadium over to the Kansas line in order to derive some revenue to the state of Kansas. Mike, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, gentlemen. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, great to be with you as well. We talked about this a little bit last week, and we're having some rich discussion and some interesting sort of debate about this bill. And my father, who's not here today, was like, I know the RNC chair, Mike Brown. We should get him on the show and talk about this bill with him. And I thought, oh, that's an incredible opportunity. So we're glad that you could join us so early in the morning here on a Saturday. For those who don't, Mike, understand or don't know anything about the Star bill or listening, the Star Bonds bill, can you give us just an overview of what this bill is trying to accomplish, the type of support it has in Kansas, how it became a bill, and then we can maybe do some questions with you for a little bit.
Sure, I'm happy to run through it. So the Star Bonds is an acronym, STAR. It's Sales Tax and Revenue. It is a mechanism that was designed probably 15 years ago by the Kansas legislature in the economic development toolbox for the state and for counties and cities to use in order to court incentive to incent economic development into our communities. So the way it works is this: when you, in a defined area, you buy a product and you pay a sales tax, the sales tax collection within that defined area goes directly to reducing the development debt of the infrastructure piece of where you're standing and where you bought that product. So it helps defray expense of the developer and encourages them to take the risk. In some instances, it's 100% of the coverage. The bonding piece of Star Bond covers 100% of the entire expense of the project. In others, it's varying. When you move into really big projects, the numbers get really big really fast. So the legislature on the Chiefs and the piece we're going to talk about here with Chiefs and Royals, it was a 70%. And it required that the minimum expenditure on the defined area be $1 billion. So right now, and this is no joke, the two areas that seem to be the most in play are both crops. So they're paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 a year in property tax and zero sales tax. So if we put an Arrowhead West in somewhere in Kansas, in Johnson County or in Wyandotte County, the very northeast corner of our state, the most populous area, which makes the most sense, it would instantly turn into a massive revenue producer, and probably wouldn't take anywhere near the 30 years they've got chalked up for that project to pay those star bonds back. So the beauty of the star bonds, it doesn't cost the general taxpayer. There is no general obligation to the taxpayer of Kansas. There's no responsibility. There's no hook. There's no liability. It is 100% the responsibility of the bondholders, and for those bondholders to get paid back, that project must be successful. And it's hard to imagine a scenario where moving the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending world champions, to Kansas would not be successful. So from that perspective, it looks like about as great of a bet as you could possibly make. I still have a little bit of reservation about the package that they put together, but I will say it is critically important to the metropolitan area to hold on to the two major league sports franchises we have, regardless of whether they are on the Kansas or Missouri side. Keeping them in the Kansas City area gives Kansas City a certain amount of gravitas in the bigger picture of having two major league teams here for a relatively small market.
So, Mike, I think I have a couple questions, and then I'll let Nate and Dan jump in here as well. The first question is just, you mentioned you have, some reservations still about the structure of the bill, maybe right now. Talk a little bit about what some of those reservations might be. I know this is a bipartisan bill, so there may be some stuff that you're still skeptical about.
So in the real world, I am the Kansas Republican Party chairman. That's that's certainly a job. It takes about 70 hours a week. So it's not even a hobby. It's more than my full-time job. But how I make money and pay for college and weddings and cars and all of that with 5 kids is that I'm a general contractor. I build things out in the real world. I develop pieces of land, and that's how my family and I have made money for generations, decades and generations. My concern is always, as a businessman, where's the back door? What if it didn't work? What if it didn't pan out? What if it didn't play out the way that everyone says that it's going to? Because I've also been in the banking industry, and I've never had a pro forma with someone walk in with a briefcase, lay down the briefcase on a desk, open up the folder and say, look, here's the pro forma, and it doesn't work out. Will you loan me some money? It always pans out. The pro forma always pans out. It always proves that it's going to work. But some projects, in fact, don't work. So from that perspective, I always want to know, where's the back door? What happens if it comes undone? What if it doesn't meet the expectation? And from that perspective, I just don't have enough information yet about if the state of Kansas issues the star bonds and we got halfway through it and something catastrophic happened in the economy, what happens and who pays? Do the bondholders, are they truly 100% on the hook? Because theoretically, that's how it's supposed to work. The people who loaned the money are the people who are responsible. I just want to make sure that we have a clear understanding that it is not the general taxpayer. That's all. I have reservations because I've not seen wording that specifically says the Kansas taxpayer under no conditions will be obligated to repay any of this.
That's an interesting point because, in a situation where maybe the economy crashed and you couldn't generate the type of revenue you needed to from sales tax because people just don't have the same appetite that they did for spending money around the ballpark. If that language isn't in the bill from the different policy work that I've done, I'm sure, and I don't know how it works in Kansas, could be different, but I'm sure the lawmakers could come together, revise the bill, write a different bill, write an addendum and say, oh, actually, now that we have both teams, all the taxpayers are going to be on the hook for this. Now that the stadiums are here and we have to pay for them. So that's kind of an interesting point to allow that back door without that language. If you have that language in there, then usually it's much more difficult for lawmakers to then revise it if something were to happen. So I think we're definitely on the same page about that. So my last question here, and then we'll get to Nate and Dan, is just if you have been in conversations with anyone from the Royals or the Chiefs or from the Missouri side, what the appetite is for this move. If either owner, either team is looking at this favorably, or if this is more of sort of a tepid response, or if y'all just don't really have an idea and you're just, this is the first step in that negotiating process.
So we're actually the second step in probably a 50-step trip here. So we are way early in the process, but the first step that allowed this door to open for this to even be a conversation, because your listeners may or may not know, but Kansas City, the metropolitan area, is the only major metropolitan area in America where we straddle a state line. You have cities that straddle a river, that straddle highways, that straddle all kinds of barriers. We're the only major metropolitan area that where literally a state line runs right through the middle of our great city. So you also may be aware that there historically has been a little friction between Missouri and Kansas, something about the Civil War that people don't tend to let go. So, and there's always those people, like as though the people on the Missouri side of the state line are these aliens that under no conditions do we know anything about, can't be trusted. And that's simply not the case. There's amazing people in Missouri, and our partners on the other side of the state line generally do a really good job. The Kansas City, Missouri mayor, on the other hand, is extremely political, has consistently overplayed his hand in the political realm, continues to demonstrate that he is always in an upward push to try to be the next congressman following Emanuel Cleaver, representing that district in Missouri. From that perspective, they got themselves in a great big rush and a big hurry to get a win. But the win was supposed to move so in Kansas City, there's a plot of big piece of land called the Truman Sports Complex. That is where, when you see Monday Night Football, or you've seen some of the Royals when they're in the playoffs from the air, you can see Arrowhead and the Kauffman Stadium literally sit probably 500 yards apart, share a parking lot. It is probably one of the most genius setup designs from the late 60s that came to life in 1973. It's genius. It's beautiful. It's on an isolated piece of land. Crime in the parking lot is never an issue. Parking, you sometimes got to walk a long way, but you're in a parking lot. You're not walking through downtown city streets and around corners. The big push by the mayor and others, in their bond issue that failed last November, was this: they desperately wanted the stadium to be torn down out at the Truman Sports Complex and build a brand new stadium downtown. Well, there's a couple of problems with building a new stadium right now or at any time in downtown. Kansas City, Missouri is no different than any other big city in America. At this time, because of liberal policies, crime is sky high. Crime is sky high. People don't want to walk 6 blocks to their car on a city street at 10 o'clock at night after a ball game to get back to their vehicle. That's one. Two, the economy that we are in right now is not good. Basic family needs are being not met, and people are stretching to put food on the table right now in an economy where inflation is out of control. That being said, when you go back to when you've got billionaire owners and $100 million, multi-million dollar baseball player athletes running on commercials, trying to convince mom and pop at home to pay for their new place to go play their game, to add a 3/8 sales tax to their grocery bill, to their clothing bill, to the school supplies. Bad idea. You're asking
you're right,
to fund your wants as a baseball owner, as a baseball player. You're asking mom and pop to sacrifice their needs to fulfill your wants. Bad timing, because Kansas City, Missouri, specifically Quentin Lucas, were in a great big hurry to run over and hurry up and get this done so he can put it on his resume. Bottom
Sure,
line
yeah,
is it
and
didn't happen. It failed.
that makes sense from the standpoint of the Republican Party. That's stuff that we hear a lot as far as talking points go from them. Nate, I want to get to you, and then we'll get to Dan here. Just some questions that you have, Mike. We got about 5 minutes. Again, thanks so much for joining us. Nate, jump in here with any questions you have.
Yeah, so in reading about the Star Bonds bill, one of the clauses, they're creating this sort of district that'll be taxable. The liquor sales will be taxed, and there will be an additional sales tax for an area that you said probably doesn't have any right now. So it makes sense where the revenue is coming from. But I read that there's a clause that says that cities or counties can opt out of this district if it's built there. So is there a concern that maybe it gets built in Johnson or Wyandotte County, and then it's just they just decide they don't want to be part of the district, and then they aren't going to be generating those taxes, obviously. And then it all falls onto the state lottery and sports gambling. Is that a real concern?
It certainly is a concern. It presents a greater risk if they'll opt out. The ticket to managing that, and this is already occurring in the background, is going ahead and with the meetings, the proposals, and working those smaller units of government that are under the state umbrella that are also in the Star Bond district, and getting their commitment that they are in. So, or not, pick a lane, get in a lane, stay in your lane. But whatever it is, now you can define your revenue stream for paying those bonds back. It's always a concern, and it comes off as incredibly greedy when one city, county, school district, whatever, says, yeah, that's all well, but we want our money. Because the fact is, like I said, there's $0 being generated with it right now. They're getting nothing out of it. So for any of those taxing jurisdictions to come in and say, we want excluded and we want our money out of it, it comes off as incredibly greedy. And in the game of politics, it is not a game of all or nothing. It is a game of nonstop negotiation and compromise. And if you find yourself as a city or school district in the position of saying, nope, we're not going to participate, we're not going to play, sooner or later, that's going to bite you when funding conversations occur downstream.
Yeah, and I guess that sort of leads to my second question, which is, was there any concern that, I'm sure that these new taxes will generate a certain amount of income, but you're talking about, potential at minimum raising 700 million, probably upwards of $1 billion, maybe $2 billion, looking at the projected costs. It seems like the lion's share of that will still be paid by lottery tax and also sports betting tax in the state. Those seem to be probably bigger numbers than any sales tax will be in those areas. Was there ever any concern that those revenue dollars that are already being generated by sports gambling and lottery could have been better used than just luring a sports team across the border?
So there, as you can imagine, in a state with just short of 3 million people, that means we're just short of 3 million opinions about which way we ought to go and what we ought to do. And the bottom line is that, yes, there are always going to be opinions about what was a better use of that money. Should it have been used for education? Should it have been used for roads and bridges? Should it have been used to bring something that generated more steady jobs versus an event venue? I have seen some of the early revenue projections. The NFL specifically, their NFL players contract is set so that they're contractors. Each player is a contractor. And when they go to a city and play in that city, they're contracted to play that game in that city. So they pay income tax in that city, in that state. And when you start looking at contracts like Patrick Mahomes, that's, in the $500 million range. And if he were to play between 8 and 11 games, depending on playoff run here, you're generating those become big chunks of money in a hurry. But again, I will also point out, guys, people lose track. I mean, it's so easy to lose track of how much $1 billion is, but that is a massive amount of money. That's even in the world we live in today, where trillions and now people start talking about quadrillions in debt, but still $1 billion is a lot of money. But I will also say it is a generation money generating monster. And it's going to sit and pay for 40 or 50 plus years. It generates an opportunity for Kansas City that, on the Kansas side specifically, that we've never had. And it's generated a lot of excitement, which is always good. It generates conversations like this, and it gets people thinking. And it puts Kansas City's name at large out into the community, and that is exactly where we need to be positioned in the state of Kansas.
Yeah, and I think some of the issues you're talking about, some of the issues that Nate raised, is one of the reasons that the Democratic governor, Governor Kelly, sort of had maybe a tepid response to the bill. Like, she signed it, but she was kind of like, it's not my first priority. But things change when it comes to that all the time. Governors have a short window in which they rule. So we're talking about a much longer period of time here. Dan, you've lived in this area. You went to school in Missouri. You're very familiar with the Missouri, Kansas politics, I'm sure. Jump in here with a question or two. Well, Mike, if you're okay, we'll hold on to you for 5 minutes. And then
Of course,
we'll,
happy to do it.
My biggest question is, you said at the beginning that this seems like a really good bet for the bondholders with the Chiefs and the Royals moving to Kansas. And I'm wondering, what is that based on? Because every stadium that has ever been built with public dollars has been an absolutely catastrophic bet for the taxpayers, for the bondholders. They never generate money. Like, economists across the world, like, this is about the only thing that they can agree on, that these are money losers. So why is this going to be different? Why is this stadium going to last 40 to 50 years as opposed to you get to year 20 and John Sherman, who everything I've read also has said that he was the one who wanted the downtown stadium, not Quentin Lucas. So John Sherman, the Royals owner, what stops him from demanding a new stadium at year 20 when this isn't even close to being paid off yet? Like, this seems like a really catastrophic bet for Kansas.
So there is nothing that would stop them from coming back 1 year later and saying, we want another new stadium. There's not going to be an appetite for building another new great big stadium, certainly. And when you look at the specific area, there is no doubt sales tax and income tax, even on big contract players and owners, isn't going to get you to $1 billion anytime soon. The bottom line of this is, you're right. It is what our friends at Walmart would call a loss leader. You're betting that it generates waves of income elsewhere, and make sure that the Royals and the Chiefs stay in the major metropolitan service area in Kansas City. To lose a major league sports franchise for a big city is akin to a small rural town losing their grocery store. You are in a downward spiral when that happens, and it is really, really hard, if not impossible, to pull yourself back out of. And you can look to cities like St. Louis, for instance. Once you lose,
seem to be the case over there. Like, Seattle was just fine when they lost the Sonics. St. Louis hasn't suffered any from losing the Rams. That just does not seem to be the case.
Yeah, I would tell you, I would disagree with that. St. Louis has suffered greatly as a result of all kinds of economic downturn. Largely,
they got St. Louis City, and that arguably has been a much better situation for them.
Yeah, well, I will tell you that I drive through St. Louis, and I'm in St. Louis a fair amount. I'll take the position Kansas City is in over the position St. Louis is in every day.
Well, the question I have is, you mentioned how Kansas and Missouri are partners despite the feelings of the Civil War, the MU-KU rivalry. Why wouldn't Kansas and Missouri come together, work on a solution, and you guys have the leverage instead of giving it all to the Chiefs and the Royals and making this a good decision for both states? Because your goal is to keep on these teams, but it should be a deal that actually makes sense for you as opposed to just the Royals and the Chiefs.
Yeah. Well, so there, as there always is in any decision anywhere, there's history that drives to the point of the decision at hand. And in this particular instance, the Kansas side and Missouri side 20 plus years ago worked on a project. It was called Bi-State, and it was a 2-state compact to renovate our Union Station in downtown Kansas City, Missouri. It went up for a vote. It passed. about, probably 3 or 4 months before the project was complete, Kansas City, Missouri, Jackson County, and the state of Missouri came back to Kansas and said, by the way, we need to do Bi-State 2 for this project, to which Kansas already had its doubts, but went along. Now they have lots of doubts. Well, it turns out that the bond issue was specifically to renovate Union Station. It included no money for any daily or monthly, weekly, yearly operations or ongoing maintenance. It was simply the renovation, and it was not marketed clearly such that the folks that voted on Bi-State 1 were not happy. They ended up voting for Bi-State 2 reluctantly because it didn't make sense to have all that money in a brand new building. So Kansas very much felt like they got a little hoodwinked on that and lacking disclosure. So the resentment and the caution between Kansas and Missouri trusting each other and working together was further damaged, further eroded, and that's why we find ourselves in a position right now. There is a conversation about the Royal Stadium, new Royal Stadium, still being in downtown, but in what's called the West Bottoms, where the old cattle yards used to be, and literally building the stadium straddling the state line. Right. Half of the stadium is in Kansas and half is in Missouri, as a compromise to try to get over some of some of this history. And it's an interesting conversation. I see it presenting a lot of other headaches and problems, but it's an interesting conversation to be sure.
I'm glad you brought up that last point, Dan and Mike, because having done a lot of work in state politics, as you know, Mike, these lawmakers have a long memory because a lot of them have been in their position for 30, 40 years. They've worked on solutions for so many years. And when they get a bad taste in their mouth, or when they get really emotionally attached to a bill, it is very hard to get these lawmakers off to a different point of view. I mean, the state lawmakers at times at different states can take things very personally. They spend their entire lives trying to produce a better life for their citizens in the state, and oftentimes when things go bad, it can be really difficult to get these guys off of that focus onto something else. I've run into that a lot in Mississippi as well. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really illuminating conversation. We're sad that my father wasn't able to join us. I'm sure he would have added at least a bit of color to the conversation. He always does. He always does. That's right. We love having him, and his perspective is always a unique one. So we're glad for that. But listen, Mike, again, thanks so much, Chairman Mike Brown of the Kansas GOP. If anything else comes up, Mike, we'd love to have you back on the show. Thanks so much.
You just let me know when. Go Chiefs, go Royals. Thanks, you guys.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Take care. All right. Next, we're going to bring in both Manpreet Joss and Trent Connor, writers for GodzillaWins.com. They do a lot of the UFC writing for us. We're going to talk to them about UFC 303. We got Trent on the live stream. Manpreet's going to be audio for us here today. Hopefully that works out just fine. Really should for them. But we'll do a little bit of talk of that in a minute. But first, I got to talk a little bit about Beard Vet Coffee. Now, listen, if you are a coffee drinker like I am, and man, oh man, no one loves coffee like I do. Well, you got to get yourself some Beard Vet Coffee because this stuff is some of the best coffee on the market. The reason I love Beard Vet so much, and not to knock the Hilton coffee here, it's not so bad. I know Dad's always complaining about the hotel coffee, but to be honest with you, this stuff's okay. But it's not anywhere near what we got at beardvet.com. This is some of the best coffee on the market for an incredible price, which is another really important factor here. And logistically, this company just has it figured out. When you press that buy button, you order that coffee, it comes to you in 2 to 3 days max. It is at your door. That way you never run out of coffee. You're not buying coffee from an online vendor and then waiting for it to show up. So then you have to go out and buy more coffee at the store, and then you've got more coffee than you need, and you don't have the coffee that you want. So what I need everybody to do, if you love coffee like I do, go to beardvet.com. That's beardvet.com. Put in the promo code Godzilla. Get you 10% off your coffee needs. Wipe away that shipping. Gets to you in 2 to 3 days. Beardvet.com. Beardvet.com. Promo code Godzilla. Get you that 10%. All right. We are joined by Trent Connor and Manpreet Joss. Manpreet, can you hear us? You good?
Yes. All sounds good on this side. Hopefully it's good the other way too.
Oh yeah, we got you. And we got Trent as well. We can see him there in his Pirates hat.
Morning, guys.
So we're good to go. Morning, Trent. Morning, Manpreet. Okay, so let's talk about UFC 303 first. Just in general, the news surrounding it. This was, and we'll start with Manpreet, then we'll go to Trent. Manpreet, this was the big one, right? This was the Conor McGregor returns to UFC fight. We were all pumped up about it. We traded emails weeks ago about, hey, Manpreet, got to come on the show. This is going to be awesome. And then now, of course, we've had some reshuffling because Conor cannot fight. So Manpreet, just for those who aren't as locked in, give us a little bit of information on how this developed and why Conor's not fighting tonight.
Yeah, so as of a few weeks ago, Conor was actually supposed to be main eventing this card to take on Michael Chandler. They've been hyping up this fight for almost a year and a half now. They even coached against each other at the Ultimate Fighter. They've been hyping it up for a long time, but we know Conor obviously trying to bounce back from that very unfortunate leg injury he had back in 2021. And it's always tough to get a guy like Conor to fight, considering he's a 100 millionaire pretty much at this point in time in his career, but also just locking down a date, a venue, the perfect time. And International Fight Week is normally one of the biggest cards of the year for the UFC, which normally drops on this weekend. And as of 2 weeks ago, they were supposed to have a press conference out there in Dublin, Ireland. The day before the press conference was supposed to go down, they canceled the press conference, which was very unfortunate. And that caused a lot of issues, specifically with people wanting to go out and watch that press conference. It came out that Conor ended up injuring his pinky toe. A lot of people are kind of scoffing at, but given the level of competitor that Conor is and the long-awaited hype of his return, I think it was justifiable for him to push this back. So the UFC ended up kind of scrambling to try to fill this hole. There's not many big stars like Conor that can really fill this hole, but considering the options that they had, I think they did the best job they could with Alex Pereira coming back to defend his light heavyweight title against the guy that he actually won it from, which was a vacant light heavyweight title fight back in November when they headlined Madison Square Garden. So they already had a lot of eyeballs on them. And this was the next matchup that they wanted to do. Maybe not ideal for Prochazka, who I'm hearing did not want this date, but probably was throwing a good sum of money to be like, you know what, let's fill in for the UFC. Let's do them a solid. Just as Pereira did for them at UFC 300 in April, he's doing it for them once again here by headlining this big International Fight Week card and taking on his former rival in what should be a very fun matchup, specifically in the stand-up realm.
Absolutely, and Manpreet, we'll talk a little bit about Pereira and Prochazka a little later here at about eight or 9 minutes. One of the unique things about UFC, and I was thinking about this when I was editing and reading some of your writing this week and some of Trent's writing. The most unique thing about the UFC, in my opinion, when we talk about handicapping or just talk about the fights in general, is just the rest time and how often, even in main events fights, these guys do it solid for Dana White. They come out when they're not exactly ready, and you just never know what that's going to do. But I don't know. The toe injury, I mean, I get it, right? Like, it's the UFC. But it's a toe. Oh, well, anyway, whatever. Conor can do what Conor does. That's his that's his life, and he's definitely made enough money. He doesn't need to risk further injury. Let's get into some of these money line bets. Trent, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Conor. Real quickly, guys, then we'll get to the co-main event here. Just some stuff people, this is my show for the UFC. If you love UFC and you like to gamble on the UFC, the best thing is the kind of money line bets in the undercard. So because first of all, it takes forever to get to the main event. Like a lot of times by the time we get to the main event, I'm ready to go to bed. I'm like, oh my God, this is
it's like 1 a.m. on the East Coast.
Yeah, on the East Coast for sure. I mean, now I'm on the West Coast right now, so maybe it'll be a little bit better. But man, on the East Coast, you're just like, oh my God, this takes forever. So those undercard bets can be a lot of fun, but they also provide a bunch of value. So Trent, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Manpreet. Just a couple undercard moneyline bets that you really like in UFC 303.
Yeah, one of the fights I have my eye on is Charles Jourdain versus Gene Silva. It opened near a pick'em, and now Jourdain's been steamed up to minus 130. And this presents a good live betting opportunity too, because Jourdain's pretty slow starter typically, but then he pretty much doubles his output in the third round. And I think Gene Silva's got a little bit of an experience disadvantage in this one, only having one UFC fight on his record, and this will be his 14th UFC fight. So I think Jourdain is my favorite moneyline bet of the undercard, and you can probably get him live at an even better number in the first round, maybe even in the second round.
Okay, so Trent likes Jourdain. Manpreet, I know you write for Godzilla Wins. You do a UFC best moneyline bets every week. So what are some of your best moneyline bets right now for the UFC 303?
I think my favorite one is actually going to be, and he's not a crowd favorite, but he can fight his butt off, and that's Ian Machado Gary as he takes on Michael Venom Page. Gary was actually closer to minus 125 earlier this week, all the way being bet all the way up to about minus 165 as of today. The kid's special, man. I think he has all the chops. He's a great striker, and that's really all he's been showing in the UFC thus far. I believe it's been 6 or 7 straight wins that he's had with the company, 14-0 overall as a professional. But before coming to the UFC, he has utilized his grapple-heavy approach, taking fighters to the ground, utilizing his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu. And with Michael Venom Page, point karate style fighter, is very fun to watch. He's very entertaining. He loves to showboat. He showcased that during his UFC debut. I believe that was back in February against Kevin Holland. Pretty much styled on him, utilized a superior striking approach, but where we have seen him struggle, and he only lost 2 fights in 24 outings, it's been in the grappling. And I think Machado Gary is good enough in that realm to cause Page some issues here. Take him to the ground, grind him out, maybe even find a submission. When the props did drop this week, you could get the submission prop all the way up at plus 900. I believe it's about at plus 750 now. I think that's worth a little bit of a shot as well. But yeah, it might be boring. It might be a little bit of a grind, but look for Machado Gary to, I think, hit with relative ease. And I think that's why we're seeing the amount of steam that we've seen throughout fight week.
Plus 900 on a submission. You're speaking my language now, Manpreet. That's the kind of money I like to throw around there. There's nothing better than just grinding out a submission prop with 9-1 odds when you're just like, get on the mat, stay on the mat. That's nothing more fun than when you got that submission prop and one of them takes them down and you're just out of your seat being like, come on, baby, 9-1. So
I hope so.
Always fun. So let's get to the co-main event here. That's going to be Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez. Then we'll do Pereira and Baraka. Trent, we'll start with you. What do you see in Ortega versus Lopez that you like here?
Well, there's been a little bit of weight controversy surrounding this fight. Ortega was supposedly bulking up for that September card in the Sphere, moving up to a lightweight, and he could not cut down to 146, which was the limit for the featherweight division. So they are going to take this fight's going to take place at 155. Lopez agreed to it, and I don't think it's going to affect either guy a whole lot because Ortega kind of cut his weight cut a little short at like 150, 151, and then rehydrated back up to 155. So I think it should be a pretty good fight, and I mean Lopez is as game as it gets. He's always down to fight, and both of these guys are really heavy submission guys. They grapple a ton, so it could stand for most of the fight. But I expect Ortega to kind of use his wrestling to get Lopez on the bottom, because that's where he struggled in previous fights in his 2 losses in the UFC.
Manpreet, what do you think?
Yeah, this is one of those prime spots where I normally like to target the veteran against hot prospects when guys are on the come up. But just something about this matchup, I've never been a big Brian Ortega fan. I've always thought that his striking is very poor. That's where we normally see him get lit up when he's unable to get the takedowns and can't really implement his high-level jiu-jitsu game. As Trent touched upon as well, Diego Lopez likes to be a little bit of a submission hunter as well. He's a grappler at heart. I don't know if Ortega Ortega's wrestling is strong enough as guys like Joe Anderson Brito and Movsar Evloev have been able to implement on a guy like Diego Lopez. So I think we'll see Lopez actually utilize his grappling defensively here, likely try to keep this fight in the striking realm where I think he has a bit of an edge. Again, we have to be very careful about these spots where prospects have been flying through their competition. Lopez, again, 3 straight wins, all within about 90 seconds or so. But like just another prospect that we have earlier on the card, and Joe Pyfer, we saw him get a vet lesson last time around against a guy like Jack Hermanson, and Hermanson, I believe, was a pretty big underdog that night too. So Ortega, veteran, has the experience. But I'm going to have to lean with Lopez ever so slightly. And obviously, like Trent touched upon, the weight class issue this week. Very unfortunate for both guys. Obviously, Ortega, he doesn't look like it, but he is a guy that normally struggles to make 145 pounds. And to expect him to do it on such short notice this time around, they should have just done 155 from the jump. So I'm not sure what the issue was there. But in terms of my lean here, unfortunately, I got to go against my guy Trent here. I'm going to go with Diego Lopez. I'm expecting violence, and I'm thinking we're going to see Lopez maybe like a TKO. Ortega, very durable, but I think we'll see Lopez really put it on him here and continue to be the company man. Dana loves this guy, and I think he's going to try to show out and put on a show for the International Fight Week crowd.
Shout out to Joe Pyfer too, who Trent had as his MVP for the DFS picks this week. So Trent loves Joe Pyfer as well. This week you can go to GodzillaWins.com and you can find all of your UFC coverage there. Trent's DFS picks as well as Manpreet's picks as well. Just a reminder, you're listening to Godzilla Wins Saturday picks show here on the John Fredericks Media Network. If you are used to listening to us from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern time, we are switching next week, July 6th, from 9 to 11 Eastern time. So you'll have to set your clocks back a little bit longer, and then you'll be good to go. Got some comments coming in hot on Facebook. So always good to see those comments. Keep it up, guys. Really appreciate the good feedback there. One of my favorite things about the weight cut issue always is the water weight. Whenever I see someone gain 4 pounds just by rehydrating, I feel a little bit better about myself. I think, okay, well, this is mostly water weight. If Lopez can gain 4 pounds in 2 days by drinking water, then most of what I got is just water weight too. So always fun. Okay, let's go to the main event here.
4 pounds by not drinking any water in a couple days too.
Yeah, well, that strategy doesn't seem to work as well as just telling myself that this is mostly water weight. So, but I guess the theory would hold that if I just stopped drinking water, maybe I'd lose some weight. We'll have to ask John about that one as well. Okay, let's go to Pereira Prochazka, the main event here. Trent, we'll start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, these guys have already fought once before, and it wasn't too long ago at the end of last year. One thing that Pereira did really well in that fight was his leg kicks. I think it really damaged Yuri's legs and his movement, which he likes to move around the octagon, stay limber, and I think Pereira's going to have the same game plan here. I think I'd like to think Prochazka's going to implement some takedowns here, but that's not what he did last time, and I know Pereira's getting a lot better at defending takedowns. So I think it's going to be a stand and bang type fight here, like it was in the first one. It didn't last very long. I think at the end of the second round, Pereira got him out of there. I'm leaning Pereira again, just based on he's the better kickboxer, and Prochazka's kind of he's not as defensive as you'd like to see against this high-level kickboxer. And I think Pereira's going to play possum like he does up against the fence and kind of counter one of Yuri's shots and get him out of there. Probably before the third round, I'd say.
All right. So maybe some stand and bang. That's what Trent thinks. Manpreet, what do you think?
I'm gonna lean with my guy Trent here. I do think Pereira is the side. Now he's the obviously more technical striker. Obviously has an extensive kickboxing background. We saw him implemented, properly against Prohaska back in November. That lead left hook is just absolute money for him. He's knocked out so many opponents in the past. Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya, Yuri Prohaska. He just catches these guys. It doesn't look like he throws a lot on it either, but he just lands with such such power that a lot of guys are not able to stand up against it. And another aspect I think Trent touched upon that I think is very important is that calf kick and that leg kick that is very debilitating for a lot of opponents. And then as they're thinking about their leg, before they know it, they're getting hit by that check lead left hook, and they're gonna, they probably topple over after that. So this is a fight, again, stand and bang kind of fight. Prohaska might try to implement a little bit of takedowns like he did in the first round in the first fight, but it didn't pay off for him that much. Pereira obviously showcasing his defensive grappling very well, looking to work right back to his feet, not giving up any compromising positions. So Prohaska might get to that a little bit early, but just as he did in the first fight, he gives up on it in the second round and then just goes out there and does what he loves, and that's trying to knock his opponents out. This man is an absolute wild man. And quickly just touching upon the weight thing that you guys were joking about a little bit earlier, Pereira is known for tacking on about 25 pounds the day after his weigh-in. So he weighed in at 204.5 yesterday. As of today, I believe he is all the way back up to about 230. So big guys in there.
Manpreet, let's talk a little bit about that. How does a fighter throw on 25 pounds in 24 hours?
It's a lot, like you said, it's a lot of water weight. It's a lot of when leading up to the fight, a lot of fighters, leading up to the weigh-ins on fight week, a lot of people just do this thing called water loading, where they're just drinking a gallon of water a day, and they just, they'll have a very small meal. So the majority of weight in their body throughout fight week is just water. So then once it comes to about 24 to 36 hours before the weigh-ins, they start cutting that in the sauna. They'll get in those garbage bags, or like those individual saunas where they just kind of sit in there and you see their head pop out. Like, then they just sweat it all out. It is not a good sight. Like, I've been around some guys that have been cutting weight and they look like a ghost. They look like death. It is probably the worst thing in combat sports is cutting weight. Sure, getting head kicked in the face is not great, but trying to deprive yourself of 20, 30 pounds of weight throughout fight week is just not great. And then, so once they make the weight, they hop off, they have some Pedialyte, they have some Gatorade, they have a meal, and they're able to put all that weight back on just through water, pretty much as the primary source of the weight that they've been cutting.
So, guys, and I'll just open this question up for both of you. Does his strategy change, considering he's on a little bit of, I guess, short notice, or is he going to do basically what he always, whatever strategy he always adopts? Is it going to sort of stay the same?
I'd like to think that he implements that wrestling style against a kickboxer, but I don't see it happening. It's not his strong suit. I mean, he can go to it if he needs to, and he had moments in the first fight where it looked like he rocked Pereira a few times, especially in the first rounds. I think he's going to be looking for headshots.
Yeah, in 30 wins for Prohaska, this guy has 26 wins by knockout. That is absolutely insane. He only has 3 wins by submission, 1 by decision, and I just don't see how this fight ends up going the full 25 minutes. He might look to grapple just a little bit, but I think when it comes down to it, he really just wants to put his fist or his foot in Pereira's face and try to knock him out. This guy is an absolute samurai, as he portrays himself. He's an absolute warrior. He lives out in the woods by himself, complete tranquility out there. But when it comes inside the cage and is forced to throw some hands, he loves to throw hands and he loves to put opponents out. And can you blame the guy? Like, in 35 fights, he's knocked out 26 opponents the 30 times that he's won. So I think he's going to be leaning on that knockout power more than anything. Try to mix it up a little bit, but it's mainly going to be that knockout power. And just as Trent said, just as I believe, I just don't think it's going to work out for him. Pereira is just too clean, too good with the counters, and I think we see another check left hook knockout here.
The big thing that Prohaska, I think, needs to implement is he needs to check some of those calf kicks. And if he starts doing that in the first round, it's going to become a much closer fight than it was in the first go around. Just because Yuri likes to move. He utilizes his movement really well. And Pajeda's he moves, but he's kind of flat-footed in there.
Yeah, and one thing we always see, even just as someone who's a casual fan of UFC, if those guys can't counter the calf kicks early on, it can be a very like early night for them. That strategy, like you have to be able to counter those calf kicks. Look, Trent, Manpreet, so great to talk to you guys about UFC 303. This is no doubt going to be an incredible fight, and we were glad to have the opportunity to get some of your analysis and insight and some of those picks. I'll definitely be taking that plus 900 submission prop, Manpreet. So go to GodzillaWins.com. You'll see Trent and Manpreet's writing up on the site. Up next, we got Jay Delsing coming to join us here, doing a little sports around the world. We're going to take about a 30-second break. Don't turn the dial. We'll be right back. Thanks, Trent. Thanks, Manpreet.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we are back here at the Godzilla Wins.
Listening to Godzilla Wins on the John Fredericks Media Network. For a deeper dive without the jive, visit the website of winners, GodzillaWins.com. Let's get back to the show with the guys in the know, John, Jack, and Nate. It's Godzilla Wins on the John Fredericks Media Network.
All right, we are back. We should be joined by Jay Delsing here soon.
There he is.
There's Jay.
There he is.
So, okay,
Hey,
two
good
things
morning,
here.
guys. What's going on?
Morning, Jay. Morning. Glad you could join us here for the second hour of the show. Just a quick note, and you guys feel free to just jump in on this issue. Usually, when people start getting up and around it, when you're using the hotel Wi-Fi, which is starting to happen now, the bandwidth goes way down, and it becomes very tricky to live stream. So if I'm starting to cut out, just hop in, let me know. Nate can take over the show. Shouldn't be a big deal because we know Nate loves to play host here. So we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, in the hotel lobby here down in Phoenix, so it should be fun. Look, you're listening to Godzilla Wins Saturday Picks Show here. Second hour, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different topics, including the Rocket Mortgage Classic with Jay Delsing. We're going to do a little Copa America as well with Dan Angel. Should be a lot of fun. Just as a reminder, if you've been listening to the Godzilla Wins Saturday show for about 2 years now, live on the radio, then you've been tuning in every Saturday at 8 a.m. Well, that's no longer the case. Starting next week, we're going to move from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern time. That's 8 to 10 Central, but 9 to 10 Eastern time, 9 to 11 Eastern time will be the new show spot. So make sure you set that clock back an hour so that you don't wake up at 8 all fired up for all of Jay's analysis on a whole range of topics, only to have to wait yet another hour.
I'll put you right to sleep, man. You can pick up what we had last week and then put it right back down.
Exactly. All right, so let's talk, Dan, a little bit about Copa America, and Nate and Jay, you guys can jump in as well. So this is the big soccer tournament going on right now. A lot of really interesting things happening, a lot of people following along on this tournament. Dan, I know you're always locked into soccer, so tell us a little bit about what's going on in Copa America and some of the bets you like coming up.
All right, so the big thing in Copa America right now is the fact that the United States are in a situation that nobody expected. They might actually crash out in the group stage, which was something nobody thought possible, given that this group contained Bolivia, who is the weakest South American side by a mile, and Panama, who is a decent CONCACAF side, but still somebody that the U.S. beats on a regular basis. The big test was going to be the match with Uruguay, which is the final match. And now the U.S. actually has to win that match because they picked up a red card 19 minutes in against Panama and managed to lose that match 2-1. So now only the top 2 teams in each group go through to the knockout stage. Uruguay is on 6 points. The U.S. and Panama are both on 3, and Panama's final match is against Bolivia, which Panama is likely going to win that match very easily. So the U.S. basically has to beat one of the stronger South American sides to pull this off. And if they fail, then Greg Berhalter, the U.S. coach, is probably out of a job. And I'm actually quite pleased at that prospect because I think he is the wrong person for the job. And this is the last tournament that the U.S. is going to get before the World Cup in 2026, where they're facing competitive matches because they qualify automatically. So there's nothing there for them to really test themselves. So they've got to get the right coach in there for the next years so that they don't throw away this opportunity when we host in 2026.
Dan, don't you think if they don't win or make a deep run that he's out anyway?
If they don't win this match against Uruguay, if they go out in the group stage, he's done. If they got to the knockout stage, they would have been set to play either Colombia or Brazil, and it's really tough to fire on the coach if you lose to one of those teams because Brazil is Brazil, Colombia is also one of the South American giants. So losing to one of those teams in the quarterfinals probably would have been excusable, but losing in the group stage, crashing out here, there's no way they can keep him.
I love how many goals we've seen, guys. Sorry to jump in, but we've seen so many goals. And you watch soccer and it's 90 minutes of, man, it's just running back and forth and some little acting and some theater. And I love watching some of the goals. Some of the when you get to break down some of these one-on-one plays, the skills that some of these South Americans have, it's off the chart.
Yeah, it's been incredible to watch.
Go ahead, Nate.
I mean, I guess so. So my big question about Team USA and their performance isn't even like sort of like the results they've been failing to achieve so much as they just look like a mess, just sort of like on like a personality like level.
Oh, absolutely.
Frustration level, like to start fighting a player in the 16th minute of a game and then get off the field with a red card, like in minutes, seems inexcusable, like a lack of maturity and like a lack of discipline on the team, and that's on Berhalter. As much as he tried to put it on the referee and blah blah blah, like that's not an excuse. Like you don't just get to like blame a ref like when your player starts fighting.
No, you're absolutely right, Nate. And one of the things that got mentioned in that match was "quote unquote" getting CONCACAF, which basically is a term for Jack. Is there something going on in the background there?
I'll mute myself.
Yeah. All right. So the term is getting CONCACAF, which basically means that these smaller countries like Panama will try and muck up the match with fouls, try and get you off your game, and try and force you to make a mistake like Tim Weah made, because that's by far their best way to even the playing field with the United States, Mexico, Canada. So that was exactly what Panama did. And you're right. This team showed a total lack of maturity, which should not be happening at this point. Like we are now 6 years really into what's been dubbed a golden generation, and we still haven't seen it from this team. I mean, part of that's on Berhalter, part of that's on the players, but whatever it is, this team just has not shown the mental fortitude that they need to beat the stronger sides of the world. Like we've been able to get a couple draws here and there. We tied with England. We've tied with Brazil. So we've been able to get out of the group stage at the 2022 World Cup, but it just hasn't been good enough. I mean, this team really has been building toward 2026. And if we blow this opportunity, like we'll probably make it out of the group stage just fine. But this is a side that should be thinking quarterfinals, semifinals for 2026 as the bar. And right now, it doesn't look like we're anywhere close.
Guys, the lack of discipline, that's what comes to me. I mean, how does that happen in the beginning stages of a match? I mean, come on. where is your situational awareness? And that's all on the coach. I mean, that's got to be in your prep as a professional athlete, man. That because Dan, you nailed it. I mean, these guys are going to be taunting and they're going to be doing anything they can do to get you off your game, and you let it happen in the first 20 minutes of the game. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jay. I mean, and this happens far too often. A lack of discipline has long been a staple of U.S. soccer. Sadly, a lack of discipline and a lack of mental fortitude. In the previous cycles, the problem was giving up the early goal in the first 15 minutes. That was long a staple of Bob Bradley's program when he was the boss of U.S. soccer. And to his credit, the U.S. at least did have the mental fortitude back then to fight their way back, get a result, and make something out of nothing. This team doesn't seem to give up the early goal that often, but too often they have one or two silly fouls and things spiral from there, and they don't have the strong mental fortitude needed to come back and turn draws into wins or losses into draws in the last 15 minutes. And that's what you need to get through these bigger tournaments when you face these stronger sides.
Dan, we mentioned last week that you thought a good outcome for U.S. would be to not advance and lose to Colombia or Brazil later, but that if this were to happen, it might be the end of Berhalter. Is there somebody that, if that were to happen and Berhalter were to get fired, is there somebody else that you would like to see U.S. Soccer bring in as you say, the boss of the team here at the club? Do you have a name or two in mind that you'd really like to, that you think could capitalize on the fact that we feel like we're in the golden age as far as talent goes, maybe not discipline wise, who can bring in some of that structure to get this team to the next level?
Yeah, it's tough to say because, I mean, there's just going to be so many coaches who are open across the world. And the U.S. has tried a bunch of different ways and hasn't really had some of the bigger names work out. Jurgen Klinsmann came in and tried to change a lot. It didn't really work. Because of that, even though he hasn't, even though I think he is available, I would be skittish about someone like Joachim Low, who won the World Cup with Germany in 2014. Last cycle, I really like the idea of bringing on Bert van Marwijk, who was the Netherlands manager. I think he's a little too old at this point. I think he's pushing like 72, so probably not a great idea there. I mean, Gareth Southgate could be an option if England crashes out in the Euros, but I mean, what he's done with England would be pretty good by the United States standards. So that could be an option, but a lot will depend on just who's available. And stateside, Todd Ramos has been a name mentioned. Jesse Marsh would have been an option before he took the job with Canada, and that's another thing that could really be a black mark for U.S. soccer if Canada is able to get through to the knockouts and we don't, because Canada has actually looked really good in this tournament. They gave a very credible showing against Argentina. They took care of business against Peru. They're now facing an aging Chile side tonight. And if Canada wins that match, then they're through to the knockouts, and they could potentially make the semifinals because they're likely to get a reasonable matchup with Venezuela, who is the surprising likely winner in Group B. So if the U.S. has to watch Canada reach the semifinals of this tournament and we crashed out in the group stage, then wholesale changes are going to be made.
Dan, let's get to some of the maybe best value plays, some of the bets for Copa America coming up. We got a couple more minutes, then we'll talk about Jim Schlossnagel. That's a lot of fun. Just saying his name is fun, to be honest with you. But Dan, what are a couple things? What are a couple things that you see, in the next couple of days that you think, okay, this is a pretty good value play that I'd like to cash in on?
Well, speaking of the Canadians, I do like their chances against Chile tonight. You're getting plus 180 to take them to win, and Chile are a side that has been really strong in past years, but I think they're at the end of their generation. I think that this is a tournament too far for this Chilean side, and Canada a win and they go through. So I think that plus 180 for a side in that situation that has been getting better every match is really good value. U.S. and Uruguay, I think probably Uruguay double chance makes a lot of sense if you can get a decent number on that. If let me sort my thoughts there. I think Uruguay is likely to win, but there's also the possibility that they can play for the draw because a draw is all Uruguay needs to finish first in that group. So there's not a ton of reason for them to push forward and really go all out. So if you're looking for a John Fredericks conservative style play, taking the double chance at minus 200 would probably be an easy way to make money there. I do think Uruguay would win, so plus 188 there is probably the best way to make money off that match. And then as far as who I think is likely to win this tournament, it still looks like Argentina is to lose. I mean, Argentina has looked very good in its two matches. Brazil hasn't looked that strong yet. It'll be really interesting to see how they look against Colombia in their final group stage match. I think the final probably is going to be Argentina and Brazil, so those are probably your two best bets.
And if you love what you hear from Dan, go to GodzillaWins.com because he does a great job writing up a lot of the soccer stuff. No one more locked into soccer than Dan, so he's always got the best plays for you. If you're interested in Copa America, the tournament, he'll have a lot of plays for you on GodzillaWins.com.
Without the tongue twisting.
Yeah, go to GodzillaWins.com and you'll see his best plays there. All right, guys, let's get to this Jim Schlossnagle news. The only reason I only want to talk about it for a couple minutes, but we do a lot more college baseball here on this show than a lot of other shows, and this was just kind of an interesting situation. Dan wrote a great piece about this on Friday, so we'll let him set it up, and then we'll get some thoughts on here. Dan, what's going on with our friend Jim Schlossnagle, formerly the Texas A&M head coach, now I think very close to signing a deal with the Texas Longhorns as their next head ball coach?
Yeah, so Jim Schlossnagle has officially been introduced as the new head coach of Texas, which basically happened almost before the Aggie season had even been over for 48 hours. They get back to College Station, and Chris Del Conte is waiting there. Apparently, he's hanging out in a cemetery for 20 minutes, waiting for Jim Schlossnagle to come. Like, go to a bar or something or a restaurant.
Creepy.
Yeah, so Del Conte meets with Schlossnagle, drives him to Austin, and there you go. He's the new Longhorn coach. So it's just ridiculous how this happened that quickly. And I get that Jim Schlossnagle wants to make the best move for himself and his family. That makes sense. Chris Del Conte is a longtime friend of his. They work together at TCU. He's very comfortable with him. At Texas A&M, his athletic director, Ross Bjork, went to Ohio State, so he's working for an athletic director who didn't hire him, which is never a situation any coach likes. So it makes complete sense for him to want to go to Austin because that Texas job doesn't open very often. This is only the fifth time since World War II that Texas has hired a new baseball coach. So it was now or never for Schlossnagle. But that being said, it could have waited a week or two. Texas isn't playing any games until February. Like, an idea that I came up with while writing this piece was just black out 2 or 3 weeks after the tournament's over, basically from selection day to 2 to 3 weeks after the tournament. No recruiting, no contact with anyone who is not already part of your program. Give these players and coaches a real off season. Let them digest what happened. Let them take some time to not make decisions in the heat of the moment. Schlossnagle would have made this decision anyway, let's be honest. But still, give him time to face his players, talk to his players, help them through the pain of coming one run away from beating Tennessee for the College World Series title. And instead, he just had to basically abandon them Baltimore Colts style.
Well, he abandoned them Baltimore Colts style and then berated a journalist for asking about it the day before. You know, you just act like a jerk in a press conference. You're like, bury my heart at Olsen Field. And then you're like, the next day, he's apologizing to the same journalist who's at a press conference in Austin because College Station and Austin are not that far away from each other. And he's just like, oh, sorry. Actually, I was going to take the job full time.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when Nick Saban took the job at Alabama after saying verbatim, I guess I'm going to have to say it, I'm not going to be the Alabama coach. It's like, give me a break, guys.
I mean, do we believe anything? No. Do we believe anything? And everybody's going to leave, guys. It's like, follow the money.
Yeah. And to me, the big story, not necessarily Schlossnagle just acting ridiculous in front of a microphone. I think all of us can maybe empathize a little bit with how emotions can run high when you have people listening or watching. To me, it's more the tampering thing. It's like, okay, like Dan, like you're saying, if you had just waited 2 weeks, then even if you're having conversations in a cemetery for some reason that about taking this job, it at least looks a little cleaner. Like Texas A&M lost, and he helps the players get through this really difficult loss. 1 run from College World Series. Okay, Texas job is open. We're going to take the Texas job. I'm still thinking about it. You don't always have to just bolt. Like Dan, like you're saying, that job was going to be his. And I think this just kind of shows how reactive some of these guys are. My favorite one as an Ole Miss fan is Tommy Tuberville,
Yes.
who was at Ole Miss
Pine box.
yeah. You got to. The rumors were he was going to go to Auburn, and he did go to Auburn. This is back in the 2000s, very early 2000s, and basically what he said in the press conference was, if you want me out of Oxford, you got to carry me out in a pine box. And then the next day, he was in Auburn as the new head ball coach. But look, he had a lot of success at Auburn. So
they should have brought him into the opening press conference in a pine box.
They really
Guys,
did
what
that.
about the players, though? Talk a little bit about the players. You're talking about teenagers.
Yeah.
These aren't grown men that are playing in the NFL or MLB or anything. These are kids that have committed to these schools, and they watch the guy that recruited them just bolt before the paint's dry on the – I mean, give me a break.
Yeah, you're right, Jay. And not only that, they watch the guy that recruited him and his entire staff say that they're going to be in an opposing dugout next year because Texas is joining the SEC. So this is going to be a 3-game conference series next season.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And how do you keep a coach if you get literally 1 run from the College World Series? Like, if you're Texas A&M, it's like, how much better can we do? Like, to keep this coach, you know what I mean?
Well, A&M knew that there was no way that they could keep him because
it almost seems like they wanted to push him out the door. Like the Schlossenagel's comments were basically like he was talking to the AD, and the AD, he was complaining about renovations being slow at Olsen Field, and the AD was basically like, if you want to go, just go. Like, was basically the conversation. So it sounded like they almost pushed him out.
Well, A&M also had written into his contract that his buyout doubled if he went to Texas because they knew that was always a possibility. Like because of that relationship that he had with Del Conte. And I mean, they're like some schools are like that. Some schools go the other way. Like Louisville, for example, goes the other direction. Their volleyball coach, Danny Busboom Kelly, is a University of Nebraska graduate, and she has written into her contract that if Nebraska offers her the head coaching job, she can leave Louisville with no penalty. Any other school she owes Louisville a penalty because they know that it's Nebraska, it's home for her. If she wants to leave, thanks for all you've done for building our program. Go win some national championships in Lincoln. But with this, I mean, it's just ridiculous how quickly it happened, and like how he wasn't even like he couldn't even look his players in the eye and tell them that, like, thanks for a great season, thanks for all that you've done for me. This is what I've decided to do and why it makes sense for me. We wish you well next season for all but 3 games.
And guys, as a player, as an athlete, there's nothing that rips your heart out more than the timing of that thing. I mean, like I said, I mean, in terms of the emotional part, I mean, these guys they're humans. They're not machines. They come that close to the goal that they set. And then, I mean, the way that this guy blows out of there, it is bad form, man. Very weak.
Yeah, and I think their number 1 player, their kind of biggest prospect, entered the transfer portal. Who knows?
And also, Jack, something you touched on the tampering possibility. Texas played in Texas A&M's regional in College Station. I mean, that looked really bad.
Yeah, but there's no real penalty for stuff like this when it comes to trying to recruit a new coach, and and Texas is Texas. Like, we don't have to. We could spend an hour. Nate could spend an hour telling you about how irresponsible the Texas Longhorn athletic program.
We could do a full mini series. I mean, I'm from the Big 12. We could do a long mini series on Texas's athletic department.
Don't even get me started.
Ken Burns.
Okay, before we're going to do a little bit of NBA here because we've got the NBA draft and some really interesting topics, especially Bronny James. Before we do that, I want to do a quick shout out to Rosie's Gaming Emporium out there in Virginia. If you're in Virginia, you cannot do better than going to Rosie's Gaming Emporium. As John always says, they are the best in Virginia for a couple of reasons. One, they don't pump oxygen into that lobby. You hear him say that all the time. No oxygen. These guys, you stay here because you win, not because you're all full of oxygen. So that's number one for Rosie's Gaming Emporium. Number two, and I'll do my best John Fredericks impersonation here. You got Colonial Downs opening, the off-track betting opening here in July. Got the Skybox. He'll be at the Skybox for a bunch of July. He loves the horses and the ponies there. So as long as there's nobody more important than him who's got the Skybox scheduled, he'll have the Skybox as much as he wants. But if anyone who's even remotely a little bit more important than John wants to go watch horses, then he has to be in the parking lot. So for the time being, he'll be in the Skybox. You can go say hi to John Fredericks in July and August, Colonial Downs. Check it out. Rosie's Gaming Emporium. They got the best jackpots in Virginia. No skill games. We know at the Godzilla Win Show, we hate the skill games there in Virginia. No skill games for Rosie's as well. So go check them out, rosiesgamingemporium.com, rosiesgamingemporium.com. Okay, let's move on a little bit to the NBA here. Nate, I'd like you to set us up a little bit because I've got a lot of traffic here in the lobby. Just what's going on with the NBA. Maybe talk a little Bronny James.
Yeah, so NBA draft happened. It was I guess Wednesday, and then the second round was Thursday. A lot of big news. The Lakers absolutely selling out, drafting Bronny James in the second round to presumably it looked like a move just to keep LeBron around for another year and try and keep that sort of core intact. That was the big news. We got Zach Edey headed to Memphis. I know Jack is excited about that. He's a big Memphis Grizzly guy. The Kyle Filipowski on draft day, everyone was kind of wondering how he fell in the draft. And then his family got on Twitter and sort of exposed what has been apparently a fairly major concern of theirs, that Kyle Filipowski is dating someone who's quite a bit older than him and has been sort of interested in him since he was in high school. When she was his babysitter. He's since converted to Mormonism. It's caused quite a big rift in their family, according to social media. And then Kyle Filipowski, all he does is fall in the draft to the Utah Jazz, which seems like the perfect landing spot for a guy who's recently converted to Mormonism and has scared off every other NBA team. So a lot of big storylines in the NBA draft. I guess we'll just start with Bronny, just because LeBron James is, always going to control the sort of NBA storylines. Even, though he's not eligible to be drafted, he's still the biggest story of the draft somehow. Nepotism has been existing in the NBA for time immemorial. How do we feel about Bronny getting drafted here? Is that the right move? Do you just do it because nepotism is a thing in the NBA, or is there something fundamentally wrong with drafting a player who probably had no business being drafted this early, or at all?
I'll jump in. I think it's so insulting to the other players. I mean, he's drafted 55th. I mean, I looked up. I think Mark Ivaroni was drafted 55th. There's just not a whole lot of impact from there. So I'm looking at it from two windows. If I was LeBron and I could control the situation and hold the Lakers hostage like I did, because, LeBron had the next day sign in or opt out. Mm-hmm. So it's okay, Bronny, or I'm out. I mean, that, and you look at so I get that. I mean, it would be so super cool if I had a son to be able to play with him as a professional athlete. But I mean, make it so, let him earn it. I mean, there's some people have worked their whole life to try to have this dream come true of getting drafted. And then this guy just has his son drafted because he can control so much. I think it's a sad time that an organization and a group like the Los Angeles Lakers let that kind of happen because they want to keep this aging superstar around. And Nate, you said keep that group and that core intact. Is that a good thing?
That's been my sort of concern, I think. as this whole thing has played out, I just like I'm not really seeing. I know that they drafted Bronny to keep LeBron, but I guess I'm still like from the long view, I'm not seeing the utility in appeasing the best player of his generation. But he's also 39 years old and is clearly not the guy that he was even 4 or 5 years ago. So it's like, this feels more like not the Lakers wanting to win as much as the Lakers wanting to be relevant. And I
Looks like Nate having a little bit of internet trouble there, but
But to Nate's point, I mean, that's just what the Lakers have become these last few years, and it really is sad to watch. I mean, this is a franchise that has 17 NBA titles, and to basically like, I'm not sure debase is the right word, but to just pretty much throw a draft pick away on a player who really had no business being in the draft. Like Bronny is only in the draft because LeBron wants to play his final year with his son. Like realistically, Bronny should have spent another year, maybe 2 years at USC or transferred to somewhere else that can help him develop the finer points of his game because he is just not an NBA player at this stage. And NBA coaches and teams don't have time to train their players, don't have time to teach them the fundamentals of basketball. Like that's why you go to college to get that experience from some of the game's greatest teachers. And it's just not going to happen in the NBA, and it's not going to happen ever for him now.
It's interesting, guys, because Jerry West passed away this week, and he was kind of the architect of so many of those championships. Believe it or not, 100 years ago when I was in college at UCLA, he was a gigantic golf fan, and he would play with us, and he would tell us about certain players and things like that. And this guy was as tough from West Virginia. He was as tough as they get. And to your point, Dan, I think you're right. It just shows you the state of what the Los Angeles Lakers are today.
And it's really, to me, like, I'm not worried about the nepotism thing. Not a lot of stars are drafted at pick 58. So everybody's a gamble once you get that far down the line. I do think this is a little unfair to Bronny, like Dan said, who could have used another year or two in college to really develop his game. He's certainly athletic enough and has a lot of the tools that could make him a successful NBA player. We'll probably see him play in the B League on their minor league team, basically the Lakers, for quite a while. It's also just going to be such a sideshow. I mean, he's not going to get to play in Staples Center very often. When he does, it's going to be a blowout. There's going to be a lot of just camera work, photo shoots, all this stuff. He already released a commercial with his father. So, I mean, a lot of this is marketing tools. A lot of this is just trying to get seats into Staples Center, although I doubt they have much of a problem with that. Keep them relevant and keep their star happy. I mean, that's the same thing with JJ Redick, which I don't think we talked about. We talked about a little bit of that last week. The JJ Redick hire was head scratching in the same way, but that's who LeBron James wanted, and you keep your superstar happy, even if that means sacrificing wins, which obviously the Lakers have been doing since the bubble season when they made that incredible run. So
there is a way that you can make a father-son pairing actually work to an extent. Like the Seattle Mariners did it when Ken Griffey Jr. and Ken Griffey Sr. shared the same outfield, but that was different because Ken Griffey Jr. was a star in his own right at that point, and the Mariners needed some PR. They signed Ken Griffey Sr., who, although he was 40, he was a proven major leaguer, so put him in the number 2 slot along with his son. It's a good story. His son is a star, so there's no issue there. This just doesn't work. I'm sorry, it doesn't.
It doesn't work.
No, it really doesn't. Let's do one more little basketball nugget, then Jay will get to the Rocket Mortgage Classic, which I have a lot of thoughts on. We'll just starting with Aaron Rye, ball striker mania there. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But one more NBA draft thing that we can do just quickly, I think, is this Kyle Filipowski story, which it is a story, but maybe more of a Twitter story. He seems to have fallen pretty far in the draft because of his, personal relationship with his girlfriend, who is a Mormon, and I guess has Filipowski's cut off contact with his family and all this other stuff. Of course, Filipowski was the big star at Duke. Dan, Jay, is this a story? I mean, what's going on here with Filipowski?
It sounds like a soap opera drama to me, maybe like a Dateline story if somebody gets killed. I mean, I read it and I thought, are you serious? And then he gets drafted at Utah. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. Maybe there's some divine intervention going on here. So I read it and honest to God, I thought, how do we put all of these pieces together? And this is perfect for social media. Guys, I'm old and I don't follow social media too much, but this is like, because could you imagine I read some of the shots people are taking. It's pretty comical. But I mean, the bottom line is what's going to happen on the court. Unfortunately, we lose track of what we're here to talk about, and that's sports, because we get this story that is so twisted. It's hard to make something up so bizarre.
Yeah. I hadn't heard anything about it until now, and it's just wow. Like just some of the stuff around this. Like, how do people even come up with this?
Yeah, this is pretty. In the draft like this, where I think a lot of the talent is maybe lacking a little bit, less star power than we've seen before. We get these kind of sideshow issues up, but we've seen this in sports before. Jay, to use a golf analogy, I guess Patrick Reed did very similar things with his family when he married his wife and became very close with his wife's family. And I think religion, is involved a little bit with that. But there were a lot of stories, of course, when he won the Masters. Now, this is a long time ago now. It feels like, God, it feels like forever when Patrick Reed won the Masters. But, he's from Augusta, and his family was not allowed to speak to him. He didn't celebrate with his family, doesn't talk to his family at all. So we've seen this happen in sports before, but the golf thing seemed, of course, like a bigger story because of the fact that Patrick Reed had won what is about the biggest tournament you can win in golf.
It's interesting too, isn't it? Because we wind up losing, like I was saying, you lose track of the sport in this whole thing. I mean, Patrick Reed is all an afterthought now. He's gone to live, and when I, to your point, Jack, I started thinking about how long ago was that? With where it doesn't seem like that long ago, but with him going to live and basically falling off the face of golf. The last thing I can remember that he did that was significant, I think he had a decent Masters this year, but was the Teagate thing when he threw a tee at Rory and I'm like, oh, that's the sort of stuff, guys, that just makes me like, can we just talk about, can we talk about the sport again? Because we just get so off track easily. But yeah, this Filipowski thing, I mean, it's almost like that car crash, guys, that you can't look away from. You know what I mean? Because you're like, wait a minute. Then you start realizing there's this babysitter aspect, and you're like, whoa, what happened? And we're Mormon, so, there's that.
Right. Yeah. Hard to know. Well, it should be interesting to see how some of this stuff pans out. Of course, Bronny James is dominating the news here for the NBA draft, but there is some talent that Dalton Connect, I think, was an interesting pick and maybe a steal for the Lakers. Zach Edey for the Grizzlies was kind of an interesting pick. And then, of course,
Edey makes a lot of sense for Memphis.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, it's interesting with Edey because it's hard to know if he can expand his game to what the modern big man can do these days. We haven't seen him do too much outside of the post, and the NBA teams just don't run post anymore. They don't rely on post players. But it's an interesting choice, especially with John Morant, who can. Ja has had a lot of success with big men like Steven Adams before, and there's another guy who's just blanking. He played for the Pelicans after he was traded, a big center. He has some success with big guys on the court. So it'll be interesting to see if Edey can complement his game. But I think a lot of people are dogging the Edey pick and stuff, but I think Edey has shown that he can grow as a player, and I think he can probably expand the game a little bit. And
oh my God, yes.
Yeah, I'm not saying he can develop like an outside shot, like all of a sudden he's going to be draining threes, but he doesn't have to.
He's not bad. He's not bad at shooting there. Purdue just didn't ask him to do it very often.
Also true, right? And that is Purdue's game. They run the game through the post. They like to have big guys in the post who play like that. So I do think that people kind of, if you're maybe Edie doesn't translate as well, but he doesn't have to be the star here. John Moran is the star, and he can support this
Yeah,
pretty well.
and I mean, I've watched Edie a fair amount from covering both Penn State and Purdue, and it's been pretty amazing to see just how much growth he has had as a player the last couple years. Like, um, I think his sophomore season, I'm covering the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis, and he was barely getting off the bench at that point. Like he was maybe playing 10 to 15 minutes, and like during the game, my mother actually texted me, "Who's the tree from Purdue?" And
He's a big man.
basically, well, yeah, I mean, he absolutely is huge, but he's a lot more than just being tall at this point. Like that year, that was pretty much show him what he was. But the last 2 seasons, he has really developed his game, and he's a lot more versatile than people think.
And guys, look at the way the big man and their roles are changing in the NBA, where you get these guys like Doncic. These guys don't even, they look like they're 6'4", 6'5", but you get these 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" guys that are playing out way past the post and are basically directing offenses and stuff like that. I mean, it's really it's almost like an evolution in the way the NBA, because back in the day it was the Laker triangle and things like that, and those days are gone. It's interesting to watch it develop. It's like this. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but it's this wild version of one-on-one with 5 guys on each side. It's really impressive.
And these guys like Edie, they can grow. Not everybody comes out like Wemby and already has kind of all these tools. We've seen a lot of big men like Giannis and Jokic grow into superstars based on the ability to just learn and grow and stretch their game a little bit. And maybe Edie's a little bit stouter than some of those guys and can't, not really Jokic, but maybe can't move as well. But he'll be fine, especially in Memphis. I think that's a good pick for them. It's sort of an interesting one, not one that needs to be dogged on too much. Listen, guys, we're gonna switch over to the Rocket Mortgage Classic here in a minute. But before we do that, I got to talk about Healthy Cell, one of my favorite sponsors. I love all our sponsors, of course. Got to love all our sponsors, but God, Healthy Cell just they improve my life in ways that is so easy to see. And we talked earlier about REM sleep, but one of the things that I love about Healthy Cell is their joint health and mobility. So you can go to healthycell.com, and grab some of that joint health and mobility. And what that joint health and mobility does is it helps to alleviate any joint stress or pain when you're exercising. So if you're getting a little bit older, you're lifting weights, you're playing tennis, you're playing golf, you got that tennis elbow, you got some knee joint pain, maybe you got some stuff in the forearm or the wrist, which can happen all the time when you get older. Joint health and mobility can really help that. So what I need you to do is go to healthycell.com. That's healthycell.com. Joint health and mobility. And you put in that promo code Godzilla, it's going to get you 20% off. That's a huge promo there, 20% off. And you will not be disappointed. So if you got any joint issues, any joint issues in the wrists, any joint issues in the elbows, in the knees, the hips, it will alleviate a lot of that pain. I've got a lot of issues with my hips and my lower back, and I take joint health and mobility. It really helps alleviate some of that pain so I can stay active and exercise. Healthycell.com, promo code Godzilla, 20% off. Okay, Jay, we're doing a little Rocket Mortgage here. Should be a lot of fun. This is, I'm going to say, and we'll get to Jay and Nate here, our golf guys. This is ball striker heaven. Aaron Rye is a ball striker. God, love that guy. We saw him really shoot up the leaderboard yesterday, but a lot of interesting guys to talk about on this leaderboard the first 2 days. I mean, Joe Dahlman is around there. He can always kind of make a play for things. Akshay, I think, is another one who's been playing really well lately. So, Jay, what have you seen in the last 2 days that you really like in the Rocket Mortgage?
Well, it's crazy. I'm seeing a bunch of left-handers do well. I mean, I know that's kind of a weird way to start our conversation. Obviously, Akshay's a left-hander, but I don't know if you caught any of the story about Miles Russell. Here's a 15-year-old kid, the youngest player to ever make a cut on the Korn Ferry Tour, got an exemption into the Rocket, and shot 69 the first day. He wound up missing the cut. But I mean, you watch this little kid, and he looks like he ought to be outside playing, in the neighborhood or something. And he's out playing on the PGA Tour. And he also happens to be a left-hander. So, and I don't know if you saw the hole-in-one by Highsmith. He's also a left-hander. So you had these left-handers jumping up all over the highlight reels. But to me, you leave an elevated event like in Travelers, and it's a who's who of who's playing out on the PGA Tour right now. And I mean, talking about needing a scorecard to try to figure out who the hell is where and what, because you have Live over here, you got the PGA Tour over here, and then once you go from a non-elevated event to something like the Rocket Mortgage, it's a challenge. I got to tell you guys, if I'm a sponsor and the PGA Tour goes, we're going to elevate which events, these, and I'm not one of them, I'm pissed. I mean, I'm pissed because you've suddenly gone, the majors are up here, and then we go to talk about the elevated events, so they're going to be closely there behind. And then how the hell did I suddenly become a third tier event? And I didn't change anything in my status. So the PGA Tour's got a lot of cleaning up to do. But when you talk about Detroit Golf Club, it's one of those iconic, super cool places to get to play. Guys, if you ever get a chance to get invited to go to a golf course, let's say you're at Milwaukee and someone says, hey, you want to play Milwaukee Country Club? Jump at it. Because any golf course that's titled after the city you're in is usually the best course around. And Detroit Golf Club is no exception. There's a lot of great tracks up there, but Detroit Golf Club is an old Donald Ross course, and it's got big history, guys. It was kind of the who's who back in the early 1900s, where I think back in somewhere around the 1910, something like that, one of the prominent Ford investors sold his entire $30 million worth of stock to one of the Ford brothers or something. But $30 million back then was like all the money in the world, so that was almost the hub of everything back in the day. So the Donald Ross course, there's interesting, guys, because there's 36 holes and they use one hole from the south course and most of the north course. And I'm just giving everybody just a little bit of background, but my biggest play for the whole week was Bhatia. I love watching this kid. He strikes me as, I'm wondering when he's going to gain some weight. He's 6'1" and weighs 130. I think I weighed 130 when I was in 5th grade. This kid is playing on the PGA Tour. He's won twice. He's got an unbelievable future. But the thing that strikes me most about him is this self-belief, guys. Imagine you're 17 years old and you're the #1 amateur in the world. Okay, this was before PGA Tour University and all this stuff. You're the #1 player in the world, and you've got a scholarship opportunity to play anywhere you want, any single university in the U.S. And what do? You turn pro. And I got to tell you, it's a ballsy move, and he has backed it up. He won his very first ever Corn Ferry event once he got out there. And guys, he had no status whatsoever. So he started qualifying on Mondays and trying to get into this thing. So this guy's got a ton of self-belief. You're going to watch this kid for a long, long time, I believe. As long as he doesn't get hurt. His body reminds me a little bit of Zalatoris, where he's super powerful, but rail thin. And we've already seen Zalatoris go down to back surgery. So I like him. You brought up Ray. Ray's an interesting guy. He sticks out to me, Jack, because he wears 2 gloves. We used to have Tommy 2 gloves, back in the day when we played. But he is a good ball striker. And it's neat to watch these Europeans come over where they've had success on the DP World Tour and come over and try to make a name for themselves, kind of like Robert McIntyre did a couple weeks ago at the Canadian.
Absolutely. A lot of these guys on the DP World Tour have had a lot of success here. Nate, now Bhatia really has elevated his game in the last year or so. He's been on the leaderboard a lot lately. What has he done just this season to really his game and get him kind of in conversation, in contention for a lot of tournaments, not just 1 or 2?
I mean, for Akshay, it was the ball striking was always there. He's got plenty of power, despite being sort of a thinner frame. The iron play was always good. It was just the putting. He was just a disaster on the greens when he first got kind of out on tour, and you'd see him. He'd have kind of a good putting week, and he'd kind of pop for a week or two, and then it was back to the same old, same old. And it seemed like the only courses for a little while, and this was true on Corn Ferry as well as sort of his early PGA Tour days, was he really only played well on courses that had kind of slower greens. He played well like when they went to the Bahamas. He played well when they went to Mexico. Greens are a little slower, a little different than typical PGA Tour fare, and he tended to putt pretty well there. And then you put him on some like kind of slicker greens, some more traditional sort of PGA Tour events, and he just didn't have it. He didn't get it. He made a bunch of changes to his putting. He's always sort of fiddling with it, and he seems to have found something with a broomstick, and now he's putting pretty well. I mean, I think he's 15th in strokes gained putting this week. He's leading the field in ball striking. But really it's just when Akshay can put the putter, when he can just make it sort of just at least neutral, he's going to be in the hunt, just on the strength of his other overall game.
Right. And I mean, we see a lot of elite putters, I think, in the Rocket Mortgage right now. Taylor Montgomery is kind of up there on the leaderboard. He's an elite putter. So a lot of ball strikers, a lot of putting. So Jay, I guess from a question I've got for someone who's played Detroit, why is it that the ball strikers have so much success here at Detroit? Like, what are the keys to success for these guys in the next 2 days to close this out from someone who's played Detroit Golf Club?
You know what? Typically, Jack, when you play a Donald Ross course, it's more about, and one of the things that makes the scoring low, guys, when you come into the Midwest and you're playing, it's so dang hot that the greens have to be watered so much to keep them alive. But anytime you've ever played a Donald Ross course, man, the greens slope a lot from back to front, So it's one thing to hit the ball close, but it's another thing to hit it on the correct side of the hole. And when the guys like a Cameron Young, who is on a heater right now after his 59, and he turns the front nine on Sunday at 30 last week at the Travelers, and he's in the top 10. Guys that can control their ball, keep it below the hole. I mean, guys, you'd almost rather have an 8 or 10 footer up the hill than say a 4 or 5 footer on the side of the hill. We've probably all seen the memes and stuff from Rory after what's happened at Pinehurst number 2 with him lipping out, holes the size of your backyard and things like that. But it becomes really true at a place like Detroit Golf because the greens. They're smallish greens, but they're where the tour will hide the flag sticks. You've got to be in the right spot to be able to convert, and I think that's the key. And the other thing is, guys, smashing it off the tee. And Akshay is surprisingly long. His speed is remarkable. I mean, there's nobody on the PGA Tour that's really short. Everybody's long, and then you have guys that just kill it. And so I picked early in the week this kid from Canada, Taylor Pendrith. He might hit a 400-yard drive this weekend. So if he can get his putter hot on the weekend, it's going to be interesting to see on the weekend, because this is a good leaderboard, guys, but it's not that typical leaderboard where you're like, we've got, I thought it was interesting that Ricky Fowler, who's the defending champ, admitted yesterday in his press conference that he's dealing with the yips. And I mean, guys, I don't know if you've ever had the yips before, but they follow you. You go to bed thinking about the yips. You drink your coffee thinking about it. It's an all-encompassing thing. And so it makes a lot of sense on why Fowler's year's been so bad, because he is off the rails in strokes gained putting, but most of his other stats are at least serviceable. And so he's one of these guys I root for, guys, in terms of being a human being. You'd love to sit down and have a beer with this guy. Ricky Fowler is a really great human being.
Jay, one guy
we're not.
One guy that you mentioned, Cameron Young. What is he going to need to do to finally put one in the winning column? Because he's come so close so many times, and as you mentioned, he's up there again.
Yeah, his putting is one of the things, Dan, that holds him back as well. As Nate's pointed out beautifully about Akshay, it's also odd that you see a 22-year-old tour player putting with a broomstick already. So that tells you one of two things. Akshay is either extremely desperate or very creative. And so Cameron Young is one of these guys that is a kind of a ball hitting machine, really. And I think as he goes, as his putter goes, is the way he goes. And I think what's going to be important is for him to get off to a fast start. The problem when you go to these events, guys, and look at this type of leaderboard, when you've got a bunch of players between you and the top, there's so many bunches. Somebody every day on the PGA Tour shooting 63. You know what I mean? And so you just cannot. I can't express it. Someone called and I did an interview this week in the Phoenix Open back 100 years ago. On Sunday, I had a one-stroke lead with 6 holes to go, and I was playing with Mark Calcavecchia. And Mark Calcavecchia birdied 9 of the last 12. I felt like I was caddying for him. I was like, dude, what in the hell is going on?
What can
and
you
on
do?
18, there's millions of people out there. He duck hooks this 7-iron, and it goes 30 yards left of the green, and the flagstick is in the back right, and he holds it.
Oh, my
And I
God.
was like, that I give. But guys, that's the sort of thing that happens on the PGA Tour. You have to put your foot on the gas pedal and never take it off. And for our bettors out there, here's something really important to know. Every single PGA Tour player, Scotty Scheffler, Tiger Woods, we make 80% of our money 6 tournaments. In 6 tournaments. And so here's how that breaks down. When you can get up that leaderboard and say you get a solo third, and check out what the money looks like when you finish solo third compared to finishing T10th. It absolutely falls so precipitously down that when you're up there and you're trying to maintain, you get passed like I don't know, like you're standing on the side of the road and the train is going by you. That's how fast the PGA Tour players go by you. You've got to keep your foot on the gas. You got to keep making birdies. And there was a formula that the caddies, interestingly enough, back before we had all of this advanced media, guys, the caddies put this together and it said, making a birdie coming down the stretch in your last 3 to 4 holes is twice as valuable to you as making a bogey. So as you make a bogey, you're up there, you know you're going to fall. But if you're going for it and make that birdie, you've got to go for it because it's twice as valuable, because you'll start leaping up there and make so much more money. So it's interesting, once the purses got big, the caddies figured out this thing, they figured out these formulas back in our day. And now all you have to do is, there's advanced metrics all over the place. But it's really interesting. The golf on the PGA Tour is about streaks. You get guys like Scheffler that's won 6 tournaments, add up those 6 things, and it's going to be 80% of his money. But all these other guys that you like, you follow, you bet on them. It's a 6-week run, man, and then sometimes you're not heard from the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I mean, anecdotally, I kind of knew that was true just from watching golf all the time. But yeah, I mean, to put a point on it, I guess. So as we're watching this, presumably a birdie fest, the next couple of days in Detroit, and we've already seen that the low scores are out there. Rye shot 65 yesterday. Joel Damon shot 64. There were a couple 64s out there yesterday. So who is going to keep their foot on the gas pedal? Who do you like kind of moving through the next couple of days? Do you think Akshay is going to close another one, or do we like Cam Young to kind of finally stop finishing second and win it?
I don't. I love the heater that Cam Young's on. I think today and this is obviously going to be like, well, duh, but moving day says everything, right? So this is, if Cam Young doesn't deliver something mid 60, 68 or below, he's really got to be up against it, because there's so many guys. Taylor Montgomery is a hell of a good player. Eric Van Rooyen is an interesting story, and when he gets going, seems to make a lot of birdies. We don't have Eric Cole is another guy that's ready to win. He's another great ball striker, but the putter seems to leave him. So I like Akshay. I really do. I think Batia's going to close this out. I liked him from the beginning of the week as I was going down the list and looking at people. The thing is, I look at the leaderboard here, guys. anybody that's so from at T10th right now is Knapp and Wesley Bryan and Nate Shipley, who's the amateur that just turned pro.
Yeah.
In a great story, but they're at 9 under par and 4 shots back. This is the day where if Akshay wants to grab this thing by the throat, he comes out and goes in the mid 60s, and everybody else is finishing second. That's the way I look for it to unfold. But Troy, here's a guy that's a real sleeper, and a guy named Troy Merritt. I played a lot of golf with Troy. He's really, really solid. But guys, he's not the sort of player that I would expect to go crazy on a low scoring week like this. But every once in a while, the guy pops up there, and he's won before. So, I'm looking for experience today. That's what I'm looking for. And so, Van Rooyen's won before, and Merritt's won before. You've always got to get your first win sometime.
Sure.
Aaron Ray's going to be interesting, but when I saw Bhatia playing last week, I'm like,
just a couple seconds here, Jay.
It just looked in my mind. I'm like, this dude is he's going to gin this week. That's just what I thought.
Yeah. All right. That was the Godzilla Wins Sports Show. Thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you to Trent Connor, Manpreet Joss, Dan Angel, Jay Delsing, Mike Brown, RNC chair for Kansas, Jack, and myself, Nate Perry. Stay tuned to the John Fredericks Radio Network, and have a good day.
See you, boys.